refugees and speakers who would join us today and hopefully enrich that national conversation. It is such an important event today, and if anything on this great event, if anything we learned in the last few months during those weird and hard times is basically the fact that we learned the obvious, that we live in this world together. And for us to compact any crisis or anything, we have to act together to stay safer and stronger. Unfortunately, the word Refugee Day basically is an important alert, an occasion that every year people around the world should remember not to leave anyone behind. Not only those the most vulnerable, but those who are the most resilient, those who are highly talented and outstandingly creative behind. Unfortunately, every year the world failed to remember. And this shows in numbers. In 2017, refugees were close to 68 million and IDPs in the world. Today, we're facing about 80 million, over 80 million refugees. So the numbers, and we continue to show those kind of troubling numbers. But among all of those troubling numbers and facts, Canada and Canadian remain to be the beacon of hope for refugees. Canada being the most resettled country for refugees in 2018, 2019. And it's important to point to the fact that Canadians themselves contributed to 2/3 of those resettlements. Those who are private citizens, family, friends, book clubs, company, corporates, and that's why this is important. It's important today to basically highlight and that how can we make those resettlement more win-win situations for Canada? How can we bring more people, but at the same time, how can we encourage Canadians and others and employers to tap into the refugee talents, to make them and allow them to be the future builders of this country, the future sponsors, the future, and to be part of the Canadian economy. Welcome. Thank you everyone for joining me today on the World Refugee Day. We will start by, just give me a second to go on the screen. Okay, and also today we are joined by this event. I just want to note that we couldn't do this event just in the spirit that we're all in it together. I want to thank so much our partners from across Canada, LERRN based in Ottawa, Immigrant Service Calgary in Calgary, Center for Newcomers in Calgary, the Refugee Center in Montreal, ISSofBC in Vancouver, and COSTI Immigrant Services in Toronto. We couldn't do it without our partners, and this event today couldn't be meaningful without the collaboration of our partners. Also, I wanted to thank the Ministry of Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada, that without their fund and support, we couldn't do this event today and do even more work across the country. At the same time, as a refugee-led organization, I would like us to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territories. And here I just want to acknowledge the territories where all our speakers are coming from. So from Vancouver, when I acknowledge the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples and nation. From Calgary, the Blackfoot Confederacy, and also Nakota, Métis Nation, Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 regions of southern Alberta. In Toronto, the Mississauga of Credit, Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat people and nations. I also I want to acknowledge that the lands, that we are grateful to have the opportunity to live in peace, to work, to play, to worship on this territory. a lot of injustice has been inflicted on First Nations. In order of us to be here, therefore, it is extremely important for us immigrants to acknowledge the truth while centering the narrative of Indigenous people who have been here since time immemorial in our quest for justice, peace, and acknowledgement whose homelands we currently reside on. We must remember that many of us are immigrants, new stocks, newcomers, and old stocks that arrived 500 years ago. We must also remember the nation and people that were forcibly brought here as slaves. And so when we discuss immigrants, refugees, and or opportunities for those respective groups, this is no difference, in fact, in line with the Canadian heritage and history of those lands for over 100, or this land of over 153 years that have contributed to the current fabric of what we know today as Canada. Also, we further recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis and Inuit peoples. We invite you to commemorate National Indigenous Peoples Day, which is going to be on Sunday, June 21st. The last acknowledgement, we also, as a refugee-led organization, and by refugees and other, we stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter movement. Just some housekeeping rules. Basically, you would see that the chat box has been turned off for everyone. So if you have any technical difficulties, I ask you please to basically press on the raise hand button, and then someone from our team will actually reach you on chat. That's the only way you would be able to use the chat. But for any comments, question, answer, and I highly encourage you please to tell us your story, send us some comments, ask questions, and hopefully we can answer it. You can use the Q&A box for this. Also, we're going to practice democracy today on this panel. So for those questions that you see, you can always like the question. So any question that gets the most likes, we will ask this question first in that sense. So in that way, we hope that we can answer the most important questions to people. So please either ask question or like one of the questions if you want it to be asked. And now I just want to basically give up the floor. Again, I want to thank you for giving me the space to give the introductions remarks, but also I want to give up the floor to our great moderator. And thank you so much, Daryl, for doing this. Daryl Pinto, who is the Canadian Venture Capital and Private Equity Association Vice President of Research and Industry Advancement. Daryl is focused on empowering the Canadian private capital ecosystem and leads a team that publish quarterly reporting on venture capital and private equity. He's also an active volunteer, and trust me, I mean, active volunteer maybe doesn't give him justice. He's a beyond active volunteer. He's an amazing volunteer, helping many, many newcomers to accelerate their transition to working in Canada. And also he co-chairs the Refugee Roundtable with Senator Rana Khan. Thank you, and Daryl, the floor is yours.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that kind introduction, Mustafa. It is a real pleasure for me to be here today and moderate this session to mark World Refugee Day. I've been looking forward to this all week, and I'm glad it's a Friday and the end of the week. So here is the agenda that we're going to follow today, fairly loosely. We do plan on wrapping up at 2:30. And I encourage you, I really want to make this interactive. So I encourage you, as Mustafa said, to use the Q&A function in order to submit questions. And I'll relay that to the panelists once we get to that point. Now, the Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship, the Honorable Marco Mendicino, really wanted to be here live and in person today, but was called away due to an urgent parliamentary meeting. As you can imagine, he's a busy person. But what we did is we met with him earlier and we recorded an interview that I did with him, which we're going to play now. If you don't know the minister, he's a very active family man. And an interesting fact that I learned about him is he's a musician. He went to choir school before university and plays the piano quite actively. And one of the grounding things he does when he gets stressed out in Ottawa, as part of his job, is he finds a piano, and it really grounds him back to a place where he's more productive. And I thought that was a beautiful thing, because when you think about the fabric of Canada, and you know, Mustafa went, I think, in far more detail about the diversity that was here well before we came here as immigrants. But when you think about the diversity of Canada and playing a musical instrument in the band, I mean, the harmony that you strive to get in a band is something that is beautiful when it happens. But you take all these different instruments, and if they're in disharmony, you just have noise. And I thought it was a beautiful thing for the Minister of IRCC to have music as a fundamental grounding point for him. Because ultimately, if he does his job well, it's harmony of all of us together working and rowing in the same direction. So without further ado, Mustafa, if you can roll the tape from earlier today. So just be patient with us while we work through the technical switch. We're having a little bit of a technical issue, so just bear with us and we'll get that video playing. Here we go.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to join you virtually on World Refugee Day, and certainly I wish I could be with you in person, and I hope to be able to do that in the very near future. In the meantime, I hope you're all staying very healthy. I want to begin by thanking a few people, including Daryl, our moderator, as well as Senator Ahmed Var, who I know is a colleague and a friend and the co-chair for today, and Rana, who I recently had the opportunity to join at a global conference led by Girl on refugees. And finally, of course, to my friend Mustafa, I really wish that we could be together in person. Today, there are close to 80 million forcibly displaced persons worldwide, including 26 million refugees, and these numbers continue to grow every day. In fact, one person is forcibly displaced about every 2 seconds. And behind each and every one of these persons is a story of the struggle to leave behind your livelihood, your home, sometimes even your family in order to find safety. Forced to flee the country of their homes to escape persecution, conflict, human rights abuses, and increasingly, as we're seeing, climate change. This is a reality that is very difficult for most of us to imagine. The many challenges that refugees face around the world, including a lack of access to employment opportunities, health, education, or adequate shelter, are compounded now by the travel restrictions that we've had to put in place to help stop the spread of COVID-19. Within our own borders here in Canada, the pandemic has revealed significant challenges and disparities in the health of our newcomers and refugees. But I want to say that notwithstanding those challenges, here in Canada, we're continuing to play a leadership role right around the world. We're continuing to resettle refugees. We're continuing to accept the most urgent cases. We've developed new innovative pilots, like developing a pathway for refugees who possess the skills and the experience so that they can transition into those opportunities in the workforce. We've created a visible minority newcomer pilot by investing approximately $30 million that will be distributed to 40 projects right around the country. And so notwithstanding all of the disruption that COVID-19 has presented, we are still playing a fundamentally important role when it comes to helping refugees start that next most important chapter of their life. And part of that process is about listening. It's about listening to refugees so that we can have a better and more genuine understanding of the challenges and the systemic barriers that are faced by refugees. And to talk about the issues that affect refugees is really one thing, but to actually hear through the exercise of listening is a truly profound thing. You know, very recently, I joined the Global Independent Refugees Women Leaders virtual conference. Several refugee women, including some Canadians, joined that panel. And we were able to listen to the experiences that have helped shape their journeys and their lives. And I was particularly moved by Secretary Madeleine Albright, who talked about her journey in coming to the United States from Europe. And just to be able to see how, notwithstanding the challenges that she faced, she achieved one of the highest offices that you can achieve in government is truly inspirational. And we see those stories here in Canada. Two of my colleagues in government, Minister Mariam Monsef and Minister Ahmed Hussein, my predecessor in this portfolio as the Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, is a reminder that if we provide the conditions, if we provide the circumstances for success, that refugees can step up and they can really demonstrate, like everyone else, that they have something amazing and truly unique to offer. I've been putting that into action, and as I mentioned at the outset, I've come to know Mustafa, who is here with us today, as one of the organizers and one of the leaders at Jumpstart, and had the chance to meet him back in December of 2019 in Geneva at the UNHCR's first ever Global Refugee Forum. I have to say it was truly a special moment when we welcomed Mustafa as an official member of the Canadian delegation. The first time that that has ever happened at the UN, and to be able to welcome him right beside me at the table, to an applause that was heard right around the General Assembly is something that inspires me to this day. And I know that there is going to be more collaboration to come, and we will continue to have a dialogue in the way in which we can weave your voice, Mustafa, and everybody's voice on this panel today and at Jumpstart to help create and co-develop the policies that will truly create, we hope, more opportunities for success going forward. It's also an opportunity to recognize the courage and perseverance of the millions of refugees, not only in Canada, but right around the world. Aujourd'hui, nous célébrons les nombreuses contributions que les réfugiés ont faites à travers les années et l'histoire du Canada. Jour après jour, nous constatons que les réfugiés et leurs descendants apportent une grande contribution à nos communautés, notre vie culturelle et notre vitalité économique. This certainly continues to be true during the pandemic, as many refugees and asylum seekers are helping Canada's coronavirus fight on the front lines, risking their lives in our health systems, our long-term health care homes, and in other essential jobs, including on farms that are critical to our health and safety. These are extraordinary times, and although the current pandemic presents new challenges, Canada is and will continue to be a refuge for those fleeing conflict and persecution abroad. As you know, Canada is the world leader in refugee resettlement. We welcomed over 30,000 resettled refugees last year, as was just highlighted by the UNHCR in its report yesterday. Canada will be ready to resume overseas refugee resettlement once conditions permit, as it is part of our overall refugee plan and consistent with our enduring values in this area. To support resettled refugees already in Canada, service provider organizations and private sponsors are focused on delivering essential resettlement and settlement services. This includes income supports and services for all resettled refugees, gender-based supports, as well as counseling on COVID-19 measures, including information on the mandatory 14-day quarantine measures which have been put into place. Also, my department, along with the Canada Revenue Agency and Services Canada, held several plain language webinars on the federal benefits which are available to newcomers during COVID-19. These were held to ensure that all newcomers could get accurate information in an accessible format, and these sessions attracted hundreds of participants from across Canada. All of these measures will ensure that we are in a position to continue serving the most vulnerable. We're very fortunate to have had a network of service provider organizations, community groups, and individual Canadians that work tirelessly to help refugees integrate into Canadian society as quickly as possible. And so with that, I will be happy to take your questions, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But I just want to say again, a big shout out to Mustafa and to everybody at Jumpstart for the work that you're doing and for convening this important panel today. It's a great way to mark World Refugee Day.
Well, thank you for those remarks, Minister. I have a few questions here that were put to me by the team at Jumpstart Refugee Talent, as well as their refugee clients. And I really appreciate you taking the time in your busy schedule to answer some of these questions.
My pleasure.
So what we know, Minister, is that refugees are disproportionately experiencing underemployment. How can we ensure that employers are placing professional refugees in meaningful positions, allowing Canadian businesses and the economy to leverage their full talent and skills?
Well, it's a really important question, Daryl, and I am really pleased to be able to participate with you in this conversation. I wish it could be in person and hopefully soon. But to the question, I think it begins by recognizing that refugees have and bring tremendous skills, experience, hard work ethic that is a positive contributor not only to our economy but to our social fabric. And so the more that we can really bring everybody into that awareness and that appreciation, the more that I think employers will be ready, willing, and able to provide those critical opportunities. And that's why I think Jumpstart is such a great story. You know, with your advocacy and with Mustafa's advocacy, and I had the chance to meet Mustafa, as I mentioned before, at the first ever Global Refugee Forum in Geneva. It's about really moving out of the way a little bit and providing that space so that refugees can have a voice in shaping this narrative and creating the policies and the incentives for employers to give these critical opportunities to refugees because they have so much to offer.
That's great. Now, is there a way the federal government could establish an initiative very similar to the Federal Internship for Newcomers program, but specifically for refugees, to give them an opportunity to get the required training and skills, especially in terms of Canadian experience, which employers always look for?
Well, one of the things that we're doing in the government is looking at ways to create new pathways for refugees to accelerate their integration into the economy. And we are, we've created a number of pilots that do that. We have the EMPP program, which is one way in which we're looking to really speed up the process of establishing in Canada for refugees who bring a skill set. We also have the Visible Minority Newcomer Women pilot, where we've allocated approximately $30 million to 40 projects, which is looking to, again, create a wide road, a broad road of opportunity for refugees to come and bring their skills, to bring their trades to the economy as quickly as possible. So I think that these are a reflection of the ways in which we're innovating within government to really leverage the incredible positive contributions that refugees can bring to Canada.
Minister, you touched on something. You mentioned the female refugees. My next question really speaks to this segment. And what we know is that female refugees are less likely to have completed advanced education in their home countries before coming here. And as a result, they face social barriers to meaningful employment. What can you do better to ensure that they pursue education here in Canada?
Well, I think it begins by making everyone aware that those opportunities, those educational opportunities exist in the first place. And Canada has a first-rate educational system. Our public education system provides the curriculum, the academic experience that is required to become and fulfill whatever career one wants to, regardless. And what I'm looking to do within government, I think our government is looking to do, is break down those barriers. You know, I just participated a couple of days ago, again, as I said in my remarks, at a conference led by GIRL, which involved a number of incredible advocates, led by women, including Secretary Madeleine Albright, who herself was a refugee, and she talks about coming to America and being, asked, how quickly can you become a citizen? It's that sense of openness and inclusivity that I think that is a true hallmark in Canada, and that extends into providing the opportunity to take up an education, so that that there are no doors that are closed, that there is no ceiling that cannot be shattered. And certainly, you know, the initiative of creating a visible minority newcomer women pilot is about achieving that goal.
That must have been a very inspirational conference you attended. What was the highlight for you?
Well, it was about listening. I mean, I came to highlight some of the work that we're doing in government, but I was just in awe of my co-panelists, including Rana, who's going to be speaking at the end of today's panel. And there are so many Canadians who are contributing on the world stage when it comes to this humanitarian work in finding ways to resettle refugees. So I was proud to be one of a number of Canadians who participated in that conference, and here again. But the most inspiring part was just to sort of sit back and listen to the experiences, listen to the stories of triumph over great adversity and struggle, and thinking to myself, how can we weave those voices into our narrative here in Canada? How can we move out of the way and create the spaces for women and for young girls to talk about their stories as a way to inspire the journey of becoming Canadian? And certainly so much of the work that we've done and so much of the progress that we've made has been inspired by those examples.
So that's a wonderful segue to my next question, Minister. And what we do know, again, over the last 5 years, Canada has welcomed an increased number of young refugees and refugee families. Do you plan to develop any programs to ensure these young people will be the leaders in our future economy, especially given that we have an aging workforce here in Canada?
Well, the short answer is yes, and that's why I'm so excited to have developed a relationship with Jumpstart and with Mustafa, and that's why I was so eager to participate in this panel. I think refugees are young and inspirational, and yes, of course, having had to flee for reasons that are beyond their control, whether it's because of conflict or war, or increasingly, as I said, climate change. What we see is that if we can break down some of those systemic barriers once they arrive to Canada, that they have the same hopes and dreams as everyone else. And so I think it's going to be really important that we tap into that optimism, and young people, regardless, whether you are a Canadian, whether you're a permanent resident, whether you're a refugee, an asylum seeker, fundamentally young people want to work, they want to contribute, they want to be part of something that is larger. I've seen that in government, and that is true, equally true in COVID-19. I mentioned the example of what's going on in Quebec, where we see young asylum seekers who are stepping up, who are helping on the front lines in retirement homes to provide support and treatment to the elderly and the sick. I mean, if that doesn't inspire you, I don't know what does. And so we need to tap into that. We also need to take a look at making sure that the supports are in place for young families. So making sure that there's access to affordable housing and access to affordable childcare is a critical component to make sure that we are developing strategies that does provide the opportunity for young people to go off, get an education, and take that next step. And who knows, maybe even start their own business. But certainly those opportunities exist in Canada, and we would like to continue to find ways to enhance them even more into the future.
You mentioned such a great inspirational story about asylum seekers in Quebec stepping into those roles in seniors' homes to help out in this crisis. My next question is about generally, I'd said once we get past this crisis and back to some level of normality, do you think incentives to employers, generally beyond just seniors' homes here, incentives to employers could lead to the hiring of more refugee claimants or asylum seekers?
Well, certainly, I think that it's important to think about ways in which we can incent employers to hire refugees and asylum seekers, and to provide opportunities where they are otherwise finding it a challenge. And so, yes, for sure. But I also want to say that if we can find like one of the stories that comes to mind, like Tariq Hadad, for example, who himself is a Syrian refugee. And Mustafa will tell you the story as well. I recently welcomed him into the family of Canadian citizenship back in January. It seems like an eternity ago. But being able to tell that story to other Canadian employers to say, look, if you can give this opportunity to an asylum seeker, to a refugee, you are actually strengthening your own community. And I think by coming up with other programs to support employers as we break down those barriers, I think we will see that more progress in that area. So absolutely, yes.
This has been amazing. I know you have a very busy schedule, so I thank you again for taking the time to be with us here today on World Refugee Day. Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you, Daryl. It was great to be with you.
All right, so we're doing this virtually, which is always a challenge when it comes to switching gears between segments. So just be patient with us while we bring onto stage our refugee panelists and our Canadian professional panelists. We're going to have them right across the country today, which is a real blessing. No pun intended, because Blessing, in fact, is joining us from Toronto. Blessing and Anila here in Toronto. We have Raphael in Vancouver and Lila in Calgary. And our Canadian professionals, Ian Lobo from Accenture and Hamad Siddiqui, who's here in Toronto as well. So I think we've got everyone now on the stage. And I've got a bunch of questions I want to ask you. You know, as I said before, I've been looking forward to this all week long. We hear a lot of statistics worldwide and here in Canada about refugees, but the minister said it, right? It's really about the stories, the individual journeys. And I really want to dive down into your 4 journeys. So I'm going to start with you, Anila. If you can perhaps tell us about your journey. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And Anila, remember to unmute.
Yeah, I did it. Hello, everyone. My name is Anila Harun, and I'm from Pakistan. I'm a business graduate from Pakistan. I've completed my master's degree in business administration. Right now, I'm working as a customer support specialist. I was just hired by Optima Communications Internationals and going to be joined the organization very soon with the training. And I have an extensive experience of working as a program assistant, as a call center and front desk reception lead. I'm a multilingual interpreter and can speak more than 4 languages. And I had a great experience of working with Canada, Government of Canada. That is, I worked with the Canadian High Commission in Islamabad in the immigration section. And myself worked with lots of immigrants who are immigrating from Pakistan to Canada, including refugees as well. And now that's all about me.
Well, wonderful. Welcome, Anila.
Thank you.
I'm going to go coast to coast. So Anila in Toronto, I'm going to go to Lila in Calgary. Would you like to introduce yourself, Lila? You need to unmute.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. My name is Layla Abdulrahim. I'm from Palestine, live in Gaza. Actually, I'm a refugee even in my country in Palestine. I have no Palestinian passport. I wasn't have actually a Palestinian passport or identity. So it took me a very long time to travel out of Gaza. Actually, I was born in Kuwait. Then after the Iraqi-Kuwaiti war, we forced to leave to Iraq. Then, which none of all these countries where we live is none our choice. Then finally we could enter Gaza by Israeli permission. From there, I started to look for opportunities to pursue my higher education to get master degree. But unfortunately, I couldn't because I haven't any document to travel. Until 2019, I went through serious illness, so that they issued me a humanitarian passport. I traveled to Egypt. I received my medical treatment, then returned back to Gaza. My passport expired in 2020, so that I insist on achieving my dream, which is to find a scholarship and travel. I applied for Fulbright program for teachers, and I've been accepted. I traveled to USA, then I passed to Canada. I'm an English teacher. I've been teaching for more than, officially with the government, like 13 years, but after graduating in 2004, I started work in different positions, project coordinators with media, like interpreter and translation, teacher, English trainer, a tutor in university, and I think that's all. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Lila. And how do you like the weather in Calgary now that you've been settled there for a while?
Well, actually, I've never seen the snow, so that I'm fascinated with the cold here and the snow. And but summer is very nice. It's really pretty. I feel like it's a piece of heaven. It's really very nice. And I know people told me that summer here is very short, so that I have to enjoy. So that every day I go for a walk, like an hour or two, and come back.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Lila. I'm going to come to Blessing in Toronto. Hi, Blessing.
Hi, everyone. My name is Blessing. I am originally from Nigeria. I left Nigeria like 7 years ago, I think in April 2013. Initially, I went to Italy to do my master's program. I had a master's in economics. And after doing my first master's program, I went to Germany. I had another admission to do master's again. That is in economics. I wanted to specialize in financial economics. But I realized that after two semesters, I realized that I'm repeating everything, like the previous study I did in Italy. So I just said, okay, a friend of mine invited me to the US. Then I was writing my thesis, and I wrote about an economic crisis in my country. I just wrote a book now about it, a little bit of it. And that was when I got into problem with the government. So it was kind of a political thing. So I couldn't go back to my country after I finished my studies. So I moved to the US, wanting to do a program. I got another admission to do information management in University of Chicago. I was trying to get all the papers ready before this Trump administration came, and I couldn't just stay anymore at that time. That's how I came here. I've been here for the past 2 years now, trying to figure out what I'm going to do, like in terms of career change. Recently, I just had my AWS Amazon Solution Architect Associate Certification. So I want to do something like in project management in the IT side. So since I've been here, I've worked here and there, but most of them are like labor jobs in UPS. I did the packaging, and it just very challenging in terms of job-wise. I did the application now. I'm just counting all the applications I've made since. I've made up to like 2,800 applications for job since 2018 I came here. I'm strong. I'm just pulling through. I'm just staying positive, and yeah. And again, because of one, I intend to start a PhD in Ryan University in public policy. I did all the application when I came, but I couldn't get in because of my immigration problem. And I have to be paid for, if I got the admission, it would be super expensive because I will be charged as international student, unlike domestic student. So every of this old stuff, especially in education, I just have to put an end to it now because of my immigration. In the future, I want to teach at the university as a policy analyst or a professor in economics. That is my dream here. Hopefully, when I get my immigration things settled, I'll be able to do that. At the same time, I'm building a profession in project management in the IT sector.
Great. Well, thank you, Blessing. That's an amazing journey you've described. And having been here 2 years, unlike Lila, you've experienced a Canadian winter. How was that?
The thing is that it's okay. It's not to be compared with Germany because I lived in Italy 2 years. I lived in Germany 2 years. So not really hard for me. Maybe because of I'm still here in Toronto, not like in the Atlantic region, right? So the winter for me is still okay. I love the summer now. I mean, it's amazing here. It's amazing.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Now we're going to go all the way out to the West Coast in Vancouver, beautiful Vancouver. Raphael, tell us a bit
Hello, everyone.
about yourself.
My name is Rafael Mashalani. I'm originally Lebanese. I've had to flee my country based on on me and my partner's sexual orientation. I fled to Turkey stayed there for 5 years, and after 5 years, we were granted our application to come here to Canada. Actually, today marks exactly 1 year ago when we landed to Vancouver. So that's a really nice coincidence that I'm talking about it. It's been a full year today. I'm originally a computer engineer. I have a master's in networking and security, then specialized in data science, and I've worked in nonprofit organizations, UNHCR, WHO, on several projects as a data analyst with them. So I was, let's say, on both sides. I was on one side, in Lebanon and Turkey, trying to help refugees, then became a refugee myself. So it's been a very intense journey, and I learned a lot from that. So arrived to Vancouver, we tried to settle in, tried to find a job, but at the end, myself and my partner, we decided to start our own business. So we started our own business with a cooperative with Syrian women refugees in Turkey that did amazing knitings of scarves, different items, and we're working with them now. We opened our business on March, just before the pandemic hit, and we got a beautiful store. We decorated everything, and suddenly the pandemic hit, and we're resilient. This is not the first setback we've had in our lives, and the usual sentence of this too shall pass, and yeah, here we are today.
Right. Well, first of all, happy anniversary, Raphael. That's an amazing milestone.
Thank you.
I'm going to stay with you, Raphael, on this next question. Being here in Canada for 1 year, is there something either immediately or over the course of the year that you absolutely love about this country?
I love the amount of freedom I have, freedom of opinion, freedom of being who I am. I don't have to live, have different masks, have to abide by certain, I have to, previously I had to have 3 personalities just to be able to survive and get by. And if I wanted to express my opinion, I had to be very careful about it. But in here, it's like, I'm more of myself. And it usually takes a toll on you when you have to keep hiding, when you have to have 2 identities or whatever. But that's what I love here about Canada. Everyone's equal under the law, which is reassuring, which is if anything happens to me, there's a phone, I can call a phone number, and they will actually help me about it, not actually arrest me for calling them, for telling them I experienced X, Y, and Z. So that's the biggest thing that I love, and it's basic human rights, and it's good that people acknowledge it and people see it.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful thing, because many Canadians take that for granted. We've grown up here and lived here. We just take that for granted. But to hear that from someone who's been here a year is just it's one of the wonderful things about this country. Anila, how about you? What's the one thing you love about this country?
It's not been a year since I'm here. I landed here in October 2019. I love this country. I like people here, the atmosphere, everything about it. But the most important thing that I really like about Canada is how the government is so considerate about people here who are living in their country, and how they are taking care of them during this difficult time. when this pandemic hit, like I just came here in October and started working in February. And after just being working for like 1.5 months, I was permanently, temporarily laid off from a job. And since we are new here, I'm here with my family, my kids, my husband. So obviously, you know, you have to be like you are worried about the family, the financial condition and everything. But thanks to Government of Canada that they helped each and everyone there by providing the financial help in terms of employment insurance that I received by just working for a minimum time. And with that, like I was not actually worried about the financial condition. Like I'm quite much relieved because I have a family to provide with food and shelter and everything. So the government is really considerate about people. They're not only, you know, giving this help to only their citizens, but also to refugees and students, to foreign workers, everybody. So that's one thing that I really like about this country. That's not the situation in, like, from where I belong. That's not the situation in Pakistan. And that's why I love, like, the most important thing I love in Canada right now is this.
Great, thank you, Anila. Lila, I'm going to come to you, but I'm going to ask you the opposite side of things. So you haven't experienced the Canadian winter yet, but is there one thing you find really challenging about this country in the time you've been here?
Actually, as you know, the COVID-19 like shut everything down, and I cannot find an opportunity even to volunteer anywhere. Like everybody work at home on computers and laptops, and you have to express a good experience of everything to convince the other part that you can do it, or you are the suitable or appropriate person to do this job. So finding a job or voluntary work is very difficult and challenging this time. I'm not here just to take the welfare from the government. No, this is not my goal, actually. I really, really want to find a job, to be independent, sorry, not to rely on the income, the governmental income, you know. This is just for a short period, like. So I think this is one of the basic thing that I just still looking for.
It is a challenging time for a lot of people, and thank you for sharing that, Lila. Blessing, what about a challenge you've faced since you've been here in Toronto?
I mean, the challenge that I face is just on the point of the job side. Like Leila just said, I've applied even for volunteer position, but I tried even this COVID-19. I applied several times for volunteer. I applied for food bank. Luckily, I was able to got an email that I'm going to start next month, just like for the summer. I'm grateful for that. And for one of them I had last year, I was a review scholarship for, there's an organization called ANIDA, an agency that they focus in Ghana. To every year they bring like 2-3 kids who wants to study abroad. They sponsor the education. So I volunteer for the scholarship, the reviewing with some of the panels to review the people, the applicant and all that. I've been doing that for the past 1 year now. Apart from this job part of it, which is the challenging part, I must say that I'm very grateful and fortunate to be in this country. In my opinion, I've lived in a couple of like 4 countries, and I've traveled over like 15 countries in the world, most times in the in Europe. And I can say authoritatively that the Canadian spirit is very different. I don't know what it is, but this community, the sense of belonging they give to you, it's amazing. And so this part of it makes me consoling that no matter how it is, it's going to get better. Apart from the challenge I have professionally, I think Canada has been very good to me, and I'm grateful for that.
That's awesome, Blessing. Raphael, I have an audience member who wants to ask a question. you've started your own business in a year that you've been here, and they want to know a little bit about that journey of starting a business as a refugee here in Vancouver, I'm assuming, because they're thinking about it and they're hoping, you know, your tips or advice might help there.
It was one of the most challenging things I've experienced in my life, and I've been through a lot. But starting the business in Vancouver, just when you first get here, there's this whole connotation that refugee equal something bad in the terms of it's you know, banks look at you like that. You know, you need to have a credit score that's perfect, and they don't really understand that struggle. Like whenever you're seeking funding, there's a lot of organizations out there that would try to help you to get funding, but at the end of the day, it comes to the bank to approve it or not. So the bank needs, like, they went into a lot. We went through a lot of scrutiny. They went through every detail of our CV, every previous work history, and everything. Like we had to go, and just once we got approved for the loan, at first they approved only 10% of the ask that we were asking. But you know, we edited the business plan more than 15 times. We did a lot of research, and we did this all by ourselves. We didn't receive let's say, like, someone who was helping out with the business plan. But again, we knew best what our product is and how to better assist these people. And there, whenever we felt like we can't pull this anymore, we had the people we're working with, they're like, no, you have to do this, persevere, you can do it. So there was always this encouragement happening from everyone we work with. At the end of the day, once the loan was secured, the point of getting a place and getting a landlord to approve, you know, to have you in that location, especially in Vancouver, it's a horribly competitive market. Like, so at the end of the day, my advice would be full honesty. Just don't just go and tell them your story. Like, this is what I have, this is who I am, and just tell me yes or no, because people usually tend to tell you no in a very polite way that's very indirect, to a point where they give you false hope in a way. They're like, yeah, we'll think about it. But think about it for us is like, you know, we're standing on edge. It's like, are they gonna say yes? Are they gonna say no? So once you're direct with everyone, especially financial institution, landlords, just tell them your story. Tell them, this is what I have, and I promise you that I will make this work, and I will really appreciate if you give me this. And something will come up. Just don't give up. It's more challenging, yes. It's harder to do, of course, especially if you don't, like, if I was starting this business, you know, back home, I already have a full community to support me. I would have opened it in like 10 minutes. But in here, because you don't know, like, if I wanted to get just a wood shelf, I would have to Google like 10 shops to get a wood shelf. But like, you know, back home, I call a guy. So I don't have that here. And but you know, you learn. It's a great challenge. It's a great mountain to cross, but the results are very fulfilling at the end.
It's truly inspiring, Raphael. I mean, I'm pretty struck by the fact that you started your own business within a year of joining us here.
Yeah,
that's pretty
we
amazing.
tried applying for jobs, but there was always this: you needed to have Canadian experience. You needed to have certain stuff that, you know, I don't meet the criteria yet, maybe, or so. And just like we had to wait 3 months to hear back from someone if they're gonna employ us or no. I'm like, no, like, I'm not gonna sit down for 3 months. I've been waiting my whole life to get somewhere that will, you know, I can start building, because previously we've only built things and they collapsed because we were building on sand. There's no fundamental thing to actually build on. But like, once you're here, it's like you're building on rock solid foundation. That's a chance we're not allowed to do, you know, back home or wherever we come from. But yeah, eventually, just people tell you need Canadian experience. I'm like, what's a Canadian experience? I have international experience. Does it matter? They're like, I just was challenging people to tell me what is like Canadian experience, because I want to go and get that experience. I want to go and understand it. But it was just like some, for me at least, it's my personal experience. It was a very vague thing that I must have that I don't have, but I didn't know exactly what it was. And so we gave up on getting a job and we decided to go with the business, and here we are.
Great. Well, good for you. Now, I want to pull in our two Canadian professionals into the conversation, Ian and Ahmed. And Ian, I'm going to start with you. If you can tell us, first of all, where you work, and is your workplace being impacted by the pandemic? In fact, how has it been impacted? And is hiring still taking place?
Great. Thank you, Daryl, and thank you to Mustafa and everyone at Jumpstart for this opportunity. So inspiring to hear the stories from you, Blessing, Raphael, Leila, and Anila. And, this makes it so real. This is also, where the opportunity is, because the passion, the entrepreneurialism, the skills, the resilience is absolutely what the Canadian private sector needs. So for myself, I'm one of the managing directors within Accenture. For anyone who doesn't know Accenture, we're a pretty big business and technology consulting firm, about 500,000 people around the world. So when I say big, that's kind of the scale of it. So I guess I'm kind of coming to this conversation kind of from two lenses. So for your question around, how has it impacted us? I think a bit of a lens to share on, for us, where we're a bit of a barometer of the private sector. And so, what's happening with a lot of the big companies in Canada. There was a comment earlier about the efforts that the Canadian government has done to help people, during this challenging time. I would have to say, hats off to a lot of the companies who, in the first 3 months, the focus was on retention and trying to keep the workforce. And of course, it wasn't completely successful for all people, but that was absolutely the top priority. As demand started shutting down, how do we kind of keep the people within our workforce? How do we keep them with meaningful livelihoods? So, as we're starting to come through the lockdown in various parts, most recently, still probably early days to see some of those surges of rising in hiring. But a lot of it initially has been around focusing on ways to both retain employees as well as to support them through the very, very challenging times of lockdown and isolation.
Thanks. Ahmed, how about you? Ahmed, you're on mute.
Yes. Yeah, as you rightly said in the beginning, it takes a few seconds to unmute yourself technologically. So thank you very much. It's fantastic. I've been volunteering with Jumpstart, met the whole team, and they're doing a phenomenal job. They're just outstanding people. So I think a pandemic has impacted the whole globe. I mean, we can't really say that it did not impact here or there. Some people came out of it earlier, and some remained within it. So my position, which was tech project director for Asia for Center for International Private Enterprise, which was continuing until March 31st. They gave me a contract which was forthcoming anyways, but contract never started because of pandemic. Because my specialization has been working in countries, mostly in South Asia, and doing projects there. So I'd been doing remote projects until 31st March, but the next contract came in, but work never started. The organization, the US, because the US organization, they will be working from home until January 2021. So that's the scenario. We don't know if they would ever need employing more people in such a situation, because most of our projects are not in the US, but are in most difficult countries in the world. South Asia, Papua New Guinea, Cambodia, Philippines, Thailand, in Africa, in the Middle East, where the situation is still pretty bad. So we don't know if responding to the second part of your question, we don't know whether the employment, the contracts would continue the way they had planned before the pandemic started.
Yeah, that uncertainty is killing all of us, whether we're working or not. Ahmed, you mentioned that you volunteer with Jumpstart.
Yes.
I want to ask you, and then hop over to Ian here. In terms of mentoring a refugee recently, how have you found that experience? And if you could tell a story around something that struck you, that would be great.
Right. So I think Very quickly. So I had been mentoring. This has been my passion for the past 22 years. So I had been mentoring mostly technology people, young people in the technology space, wherever I had gone, be it Pakistan. By the way, I just noticed that, this panel is Pakistan heavy somehow, with Anila from Pakistan. I'm from Pakistan. Daryl originally is from Pakistan. So this panel is pretty Pakistan heavy. So in my own space, I was like coaching on career development and all sorts of things. Coming here, that was, passion remains passion. So I wanted to do something in Canada. We originally migrated 20 years ago, me and my wife, and both of our daughters were born here. But, we were in and out most of the time. But last year, almost 11 months ago, we finally, packed up and came to Canada. We are on PR, me and my wife, my daughters are citizens. So for us, the journey was not that difficult, as compared to the other refugees that we just heard. But, right from the very beginning, my passion was to find an organization that I could volunteer with that coaches people to do things better in their lives. And that's why somehow, I got connected with Jumpstart, and they offered me uh, to mentor a couple of refugees. I worked with them, and there has been some realization. Uh, and of course, I think it should not go unmentioned that I then, trained. Daryl and I met for the first time at that great event in downtown Toronto, where we were training 30 refugee movements to become effective part of Canadian society as entrepreneurs. Uh, so I think the issue that I figured out is that, first of all, I mean, we have to appreciate, and we do, is that, refugees are uh, under severe stress when they come here. So when you're in stress, it's very difficult for you to figure out. Uh, Not everybody is brave enough as some of the panelists that are sitting with us today. But in most cases, you're scared. You've gone through a very difficult situation, be it war or any other thing, and kind of figuring out part of the whole scenario becomes very difficult for people. So even those who were highly educated, I mean, I mentored two directly, and then of course that bigger group of 30 women that me and Daryl both worked with, they all were highly educated, very experienced, but they could not really figure out what to do. So one thing that I usually do when I coach people, other than Jumpstart also, is do not sell your experience. Do not count on your experience. Your experience is fine. It's pretty intangible. Canada is a marketplace where you have to sell your skills. So if you can develop inventory of your skills, it will be easier for you to get into a job market, or you get into your first job. It changes your mindset also. So this is one thing that I coach people, which is usually missing amongst the group that we work with. The other thing is, how do you reinvent? Once you have figured that out, how do you reinvent yourself? So Raphael did exactly what I coach people, how do you reinvent yourself? Doing one degree after another degree and another degree would not work. Canada is not a market for, I mean, getting a job after doing a PhD perhaps is more difficult as compared to getting a job after doing your postgraduate diploma. Postgraduate diploma makes you job ready. So one has to figure all that out. And I can understand it's difficult. Then the network. The biggest thing we all leave as immigrants or refugees back wherever we have been from is our social capital. And rebuilding the social capital in a new country where even the language is often difficult is a challenge. So, the resilience and everything is a positive thing. But what I realized is that if we could coach and mentor refugees and newcomers, immigrants, doesn't matter from which category you place them in. Once they are here, what we need to coach them is to build, a set of your skills or inventory of your existing skills, reinvent yourself, and also build your social capital network. And if you do all that, things become easier.
That's great advice. Thank you, Ahmed. Ian, how about your experience mentoring a refugee?
Yes, and I guess maybe taking a bit of a different lens on this. For myself in my day job, I focus very much on supporting larger organizations on advancing their social impact purpose. So working with the UNHCR, working with NGOs like the IRC and others, kind of on the first line, a lot of that has been of course, important work that's happening, but it's not the same kind of impact that you have working one-on-one and meeting through the mentorship individuals. It's these not statistics, not generalizations. It's just really connecting one-to-one as two fellow human beings. And for me, it's such an awe-inspiring experience, because no matter how much I complain to my colleagues about how tired I am from the additional burdens and challenges of the lockdown or the endless client work, so much strength from everyone, on this call and the millions else around the world of that, what people have had to go through. So I find a source of strength to say, push farther, push harder, push harder. And the inspirational stories, trigger both, the heart and the mind for this. And I think, beyond this, and I'm not sure what the representation on this call is looking at it by having had that experience that unfortunately a lot of people in the private sector may not have had, as well as people in communities that they might have opinions on refugees, but they don't know any refugees. And so they're just basing it upon the media. But I think through mentoring, you get to know what this wonderful, wonderful, innovative, resilient, strong community of individuals is about. And I think that's where the big tipping point is. If I look at it from a private sector perspective, for any one of the companies that I work with, it's really this opportunity for them to tap into some of the top talent. And I do think mentoring is one of those bridges for many companies to go beyond the theory, beyond the structures, beyond even good intention from CSR departments to say, wow, my business can be more competitive, successful, inclusive if we actually open it up to more and more people, and trying to find ways to design new processes so we don't go through the challenges that Raphael mentioned around saying, well, what is your Canadian experience? It doesn't fit like this. It doesn't look like that. That is stifling the private sector in Canada. If we found ways to kind of close some of those barriers, we can bring that innovation, we can bring that energy, we can bring that resilience into the private sector and reach new plateaus. And of course, as a result, create meaningful livelihoods and restarting lives for all of our friends on the call and many more here in Canada.
Great, thanks, Ian. Now we have over 100 people in the audience listening in to this conversation. I want to encourage and remind everyone that if you want to submit a question or share your experience through the Q&A function, please go ahead. If we don't have enough time on this call to answer all questions, that's okay. The Jumpstart Refugee Talent staff will follow up with you after the call. I do want to share one story of an audience member who applied for asylum in 2019 in Canada. Her name is Sabitra. She currently lives in Brampton, and it's been about 10 months since she's been here in Canada. She's also on the pro side, right? She's free from all the threats and difficulties which she faced back in her home country, but she's feeling happy here, dreaming of a new life that's possible now that wasn't in her home country. However, that's not to say it's not difficult. So the difficulty she faces, like many newcomers and refugees, there is the government support, but finding a job, doing things every day, the trauma that she brings with her from the situation back home, the worry about what's going to happen next, and due to the limitations of eligibility criteria, she's not certain about how her asylum case will be processed. So living under the burden of all of that uncertainty is certainly, I can imagine, quite stressful. She's been searching for a job since January 2020. She has a work permit, but isn't able to find work. She's got some physical difficulties and back pain, And she's really willing to do anything except heavy lifting and warehouse jobs because of her back situation. So I would say her story resonates with many of the stories I heard from the 4 refugee panelists. I want to come back to, let's start with you, Blessing. I mean, when you hear a story like Sabitra's, what advice would you give her?
The thing is that once you get into this refugee stream, you gotta need a lot of patience, because there is no timeline for this. I think that is one of the challenge in this refugee process. When I was in Germany in 2015, what the German did were very spectacular in terms of they got 50 like a million refugees at that time during the but what they did was that the government did a massive ad hoc employment, like everybody, like neighbors or people volunteers to help the government to process this application. So within the shortest period of time, they were able to clear out this backlog of over 1 million refugees. So that was how they were able to delog the process from the piling. What I noticed here is that I had a friend who just got a permanent resident. It came through this process and it took her 13 years, 2 months. It is mind blowing. I understand that on the part of the government, that's every day people are coming to the country, but I still believe that with the help of technology, there could be a smarter way to process these things. So my advice would be, you have this, I wish I have better answers. It's all, you just need patience, because there is no fees. The government is involved in other things, in special, most times their priorities, according to what they said, is more on this express entry people, because they consider that as economic migrant. So as if refugees and they don't have anything to offer, right? But again, I want to even comment on what Raphael said. He's even lucky in Vancouver. In Ontario, I tried to open a business. I cannot, because I'm a refugee. For you to open a business here, you have to be a permanent resident. So that's a no-go area for me, after waiting for like two years plus. So I'm still pressing on. The only thing I would say is patient. There's no feast time when they will do your hearing. When all this process, it takes, so I just have somebody 13 years. If I want to wait 13 years, I don't know it is unimaginable. I don't know the process. I don't know why it takes that long, but I try to reframe my mind to say, you know what, you just have to be patient. That's the consolation I have for myself, because I don't want to put timeline, because it will be disappointing. Mm-hmm. So she have to be patient and just be hopeful. On the part of the government, I wish they can if they can get ad hoc committees to clear these things once in a while, to help the process go through, it will be helpful. But waiting endlessly, like I said before, if I want to do a PhD, since I came in by now, I'll be thinking of, okay, maybe in 2-3 years I'll start teaching, but I don't know. So this whole PhD thing and teaching is on the shelf now until I know what I'm going to do. But now I'm looking for a job. I've pushed my dream in the nearest future because it's tied to the immigration. I'm just have to be patient. As I say to everybody who come through the refugee stream, you have to be patient. Unlike express entry, when you come to the country, 3 months you get a permanent resident. But here, it takes forever.
Great, thank you, Blessing. Lala, I want to come to you. Your journey is pretty incredible in terms of the number of countries that you've lived and worked in before coming here to Canada. And I would imagine that that has equipped you with some resilience, having to uproot yourself and build a sort of a new network and new roots in every country that you worked in. When you hear a story like Sabitra's, what advice would you give her in terms of staying positive when, as Raphael says, I mean, there's uncertainty of how long this process may take, and in the meantime, you're facing difficulties. What advice would you give to staying positive and in a situation like that?
Okay, actually, she has, as the Blessing said, and we are all have been told the same. We have to be patient a little bit, especially in the COVID-19 situation. And at this time, she can start to build good network through to make benefit of her ESL course. To start to communicate or contact with some organizations that benefits the refugees, like center. She is, I don't know where she's from, because we have here a lot actually who helped me, like to, for example, the Jumpstart provide me to this great opportunity to meet people, and sometimes I contact with them by emails. And you learn more about them. You can ask a question. You can provide, like how what Mr. Hamad said. We just don't have to wait to work in our experience. We have to start to grab the opportunity of any other chances that we will provide it, and not just sit at home and wait. And also this option is still challenging, because sometimes, as Raphael said, and Blessing, when we go to apply for something or a job, they ask, like, you are refugees, you are a refugee claimant, you are not PR residents or whatever. So I think at this point she has to start to build the good networking through the internet, the organization that benefits refugees, and till the end of this pandemic.
That's wonderful advice. Thank you, Lila. Anila, I want to come to you and ask, I mean, this COVID situation, as Hamad said, is global. Everyone's impacted in some way, shape, or form. But in terms of how COVID-19 has impacted your career, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, definitely. First of all, this COVID-19 has affected everyone, not just in Canada, but overall it affected the whole globe. Everyone is affected by this. And since, like, if, for example, if you have settled in your career, and if you have job and things come up like this, like, it would be like a bit easy for you to, to go with it. But since we came as refugees, we were very well settled in Pakistan. My husband and I was doing really good with my kids. But definitely due to some unforeseen, unavoidable circumstances, we have to move here as refugees. And by just coming here, we have to start from scratch. We have to start from the beginning. And by just making up our minds and applying for jobs everywhere. When I received a job offer in February, I immediately accepted it. That was not what I worked before, but I just accepted it because that was the first job offer I received. And I was happy by joining the Porter Airlines, and I was working with them by just working of just for 1.5 months. This COVID-19 happened, this pandemic came. And I'd been temporarily laid off from my organization, and they are extending their dates of operations till the end of July, and still not sure when they'll start again. And I'm not really sure if I would be called back again to my work to join my job. So it impacted me, my family, my job, and my career. And but I was not just by sitting home and waiting for this pandemic to get over, waiting for my organization to call me back to work, but I've been increasing my skills. I've been doing some online free courses, I'm increasing and like adding predictive things to my resume and applying for more jobs. And in the meantime, I received a job offer from Optima, and they offered me a good job over there as a customer service specialist, and I accepted it because I really wanted to start work. I'll be starting remotely from home. And if this situation would be good enough for all of us to leave our homes and join our offices, I would definitely go and, you know, start my job over there. But definitely this pandemic affected everyone, and we just like everyone here in the panelists and everybody here in this discussion group, we have to be positive and we have to be patient. We everyone is going through the same situation, and we all need each of us. Everybody of us are going to the same trauma. Everybody of us needs our support and feedback and help from each other to get over this thing. That's all.
Great, thank you, Anila. And congratulations on getting that job in a very tough environment all around.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so time-wise, I want to wrap things up, and I want to go to each of the refugees to ask this call to action question. And I'll start first with you, Raphael, in Vancouver. So if you could ask or tell Canadians, if you can do one thing to really make refugees feel more included in our economy and in our communities, you know, what one call to action would you ask of Canadians?
One call to action, that's a difficult one. Let's start with, I guess, including refugees in the conversation. That's really important. Like, you know, you have to, for instance, Jumpstart Refugees, because they have a refugee on the panel. They have refugees who've been through this struggle. They understand, they can better voice your concerns. Have that, like any decision maker, just include refugees in the conversation. That's really important. Like, two, it's recognize refugees as refugees. We're not new, like I'm not a new immigrant who've been through 4 years of a process and have lots of money back home, and I'm coming here to, you know, live happily ever after. No, we come here, some of us only have like one plastic bag. So just include refugees in the conversation. We have a lot of untapped talent. We have a lot of experience, a lot of resilience. Just acknowledging that and including us in the conversation. I think this is where, you know, change could start, because right now we always seem to fall through the cracks. You know, there's some things in the system just isn't adding up for us. Like, we always seem to fall through the crack, or sometimes, you know, we're so it adds kind of like another layer for us to reach the right people, to be heard. And I think that's where we should start.
Great. Thank you, Raphael. Lila, what would be the one call to action to Canadians you would put out there?
Actually, just I want them to open the doors for us to involve in, to develop the communities ourselves and to be part of this social or community. And actually, sometimes I feel afraid to say when somebody asks me, like, what is your status? Like, I feel afraid to say refugee claimant. Like, people look at us in a strange way, like we are committing a crime or doing something wrong. They have, as Raphael said, recognize why we are here. What forced us to leave our families and our jobs and our positions and come to start from zero. And of course, there is a very big issue that led us to do that. So just to provide us with a chance to be what we want to be, and I think that's it. Yeah.
Great. Anila, what would your one call to action be?
I would like to add my comments with Lila's, definitely. Exactly when my employers, they asked me for paperwork to submit, right? And I am not willing to, present my refugee claimant document. I don't know, for some reason, I just, present my work permit or my driving license. It's just that I want to be a part of this community more easily, like to be as a citizen or a PR, that would be like give me more positivity in my actions and my ways of doing things. And how Canadians can help us by, indulging in this community, because I've seen lots of, like every panelist here is well educated, and they have all the experience and skills they have. So lots of refugees are like well educated, good with good educational backgrounds and skills. So why not, if only being refugee claimant, why not if some they've been offered for some like different routes to include us in this community by offering us for some provincial programs, or their Atlantic pilot programs or rural programs that have been going on. Because it's just that, by just waiting for the refugee claimant thing and waiting for that to be in processing and everything, why not to be, include us in those programs as per their skills and educational backgrounds, and where we can help the Canadian community with the help of our educational skills and everything, and by benefiting both the community and us. Like that would be a win-win situation for both of us.
Thank you, Anila. Before I go to Blessing, I want to remind the audience that to stick around because we are going to have closing remarks from Rana Khan at the UNHCR here in Toronto. And just because I love your name so much, Blessing, I figured we're going to end on a blessing note. So what would your one piece of advice to Canadians be?
On the piece of advice I would say is that refugee is just an immigration situation. It is not who we are. We are defined with our situation. The process being a refugee is because we apply to get a status. This is not who we are. We are talented people. We have drive. We are visionaries. We want to build something. We want to call this place our home. So I wish they can remove that up layer of being a refugee and see us for who we are. We have the skill set to contribute to this country. That is just who we want to be identified with. And on the part of the government, I wish we can have a place where a medium, which as they give this internship program for newcomers to bridge the gap between this work Canadian experience, maybe we can have a pathway for refugees too. The same thing with companies, so that we can have these things that companies are always demanding. We can't have it. We can't, because of our status, we can't have the Canada experience. Now, the request for Canada experience, though we can never have it because we have been sensed like that. So how do we bridge that gap so that at the end of the day, there will be a win-win situation? For example, all across the province, if you are a refugee claimant, you are totally shut up of taking part with all the immigration program. So imagine you have been here for 5 years as a refugee, you have the Canada experience in culture and everything, yet you are not qualified. It doesn't just make any sense. I mean, if there is any way the government can say that if you have lived here within certain years, then there should be like a pathway. I don't know what it is, but if you have been here, you have understand Canadian cultures, that is what it is, man. If you have been here for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, and somebody come here through express entry, the stays within 3 years or 4 years is eligible for Canadian citizenship, it means that you have understand the culture. So if they have given you citizenship, it means that you observe, you are fully integrated. Then how much somebody who have been here for 10 years? It's just because of this status differentiates you. Even though you know the culture, you know the system, you know how it works. But again, because of the means in which you came to the country, it put a limitation to where you can go. I want to start a business after 1 year. I cannot start because in Ontario, for you to register a business, you must be a permanent resident. So some of these things, from an economic point of view, is causing a loss on the government. On the part of us, is demoralizing. So both people lose. The government is losing, the system is losing, we are losing. And
Thank you very much.
the last one, which Rafael said about in terms of accommodation, before I got this place, it was a student who was going for vacation in the Philippines. So she subletted the place for me. So that's how I was able to get here. No landlord were able to give me a home. None. For like 6 months, I couldn't find any place. The same thing with, I don't have any, I'm not asking even for a credit card, just a place that I will pay. Once they just ask you, and where are you from? I said, Nigeria. Are you a PR? I don't even, because of that, I was able to go and read the Ontario code, and there was no way I find that you have to be a PRO to have a home. So when I start telling the landlord, every time I called and said, I want a place where you can say, but this is not the law. They will cut off the phone. So when I start confronting them like that, no one will be able to give me a home. If not a student who sublet it and eventually moved after I've been here for a long, and the landlord have seen me personally, I've interacted. Otherwise, I would not have a home.
Blessing, thank you for sharing that.
I just say one more thing.
Raphael, make it very quick.
Sure. I just like a very solid call to action. I think would help everyone is to join be mentors. You know, join Talent Canada, be part of this. Not just like you know. I appreciate everyone who is already being a mentor, but it really helps once you're a mentor and you're in Welcome Talent Canada program. It helps. You could do that. It's easy for you. You already know everything around you. You know everyone. You know how things go, and this would really provide so much precious feedback and help that could help us better succeed in our lives. Thank you. Thank you,
Raphael. All right, so we're going to do another technical segment change, and we're going to. I'm going to thank everyone, but Alize behind the scenes is going to move Rana Khan onto the stage, and our current panelists and Canadian professionals off the stage. Anila, Raphael, Blessing, Laila, Ian, and Ahmed, really appreciate your time. And I love that call to action that Raphael ended with, which was, you know, for Canadians, mentor, and what Ian said, right? If statistics are one thing, but once you know another human being that's sitting across from you and get to know their story, you become that much more committed, and you see them as not a statistic anymore, as a human being. So thank you for sharing that. My next speaker is Rana Khan. You may or may not know her, but she heads the UNHCR here in Toronto. She was a human rights lawyer, is a human rights lawyer, and her work in Canada has covered all aspects of protection policy and practice. She has been a significant force and very involved here in the community, especially with Jumpstart, big supporter of Mustafa and his team. And I'm going to pass it over to you, Rana. So Rana, you're on mute. Rana, you need to unmute.
Thank you very much, Daryl. Can you hear me now?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you for an excellent job in moderating today's panel discussion, for the panelists, for their insightful stories, their experiences, and to Mustafa and Alize for organizing this event, and for the very rich discussion that we've had so far. Thank you for inviting me to say some closing remarks. So I will just start, and I hope you will bear with me as it is a few minutes long. So on World Refugee Day today, we commemorate with the over 79.5 million persons who are in need of international protection, who are seeking a place of refuge, safety, and stability, a place that we all take for granted, a place to call home. People just like you and I that have been forced to flee their homes, not by choice, but because of circumstances beyond their control. Approximately half of these are children. Wars, other violence, and persecution have driven worldwide forced displacement to a new high for the 7th year in a row. Just 5 conflicts account for 2/3 of all cross-border global displacement. That is from Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, South Sudan, and Myanmar, making up the top refugee-producing countries from last year. This year marks also the first time that global displacement is 1% of the world's population. It reflects a sad reality, one for which we must all engage in supporting and finding solutions, starting from stemming the causes that lead to flight and displacement. Peace and end of conflicts need to be our end goal, requiring courage, steadfastness, and inclusion from us all. 1 or 79.5 are not just numbers. We cannot forget that behind each of these numbers are 79.5 million stories of persons who have suffered persecution, hardship, and survival. More than ever, taking care of refugees must be a global and shared responsibility. We have to do things differently. And each of us can and must play a part in this narrative, as it is clear that the situation cannot be regarded as a temporary one. Empathy, support, solidarity is what is needed to tackle this situation together. Yet we must also acknowledge that there has been some progress. Over 754,000 stateless persons have obtained or confirmed nationality as of last year. 5 million asylum seekers were granted international protection. 15 million people were given prima facie or temporary protection. 3.9 million refugees were able to return to their countries of origin, and 1.1 million refugees were resettled by states. As we heard from Mustafa, Canada being the largest, the country that's accepted the largest number of resettlement in the last 2 years in a row. There has been major progress also in the global protection regime realized in the form of the December 2018 Global Compact for Refugees, with historic pledges and commitments at the December 2019 Global Refugee Forum. And we are seeing major cultural shifts within all of society approach to situations of displacement, including one with the involvement of the development of business sectors in driving these solutions. We have to remember that today's refugee is tomorrow's citizen, and history has shown us that any one of us may find ourselves in this situation because it is a change in circumstances that can change the course of our lives. We have to find new ways of doing things, and refugees themselves need to be included in these new communities, as we've heard already today, and already being done, starting to be done, and be given the chance to realize their potential and to find solutions. We all know that economic integration is greatly important when it comes to making a new life in any place. Building professional relationships and receiving guidance is an integral part of cementing one's life and future. That is why events like this and leadership by organizations like Jumpstart are so important. By building connections and relationships with one another, we welcome refugees in meaningful ways and help them to become self-sufficient, contributing members of Canadian society. Bringing together newcomer employees and employers creates the opportunities to rebuild, for refugees to rebuild their lives, and for host systems to benefit as a whole. The truth is that we can all help finding solutions for refugees, and we all have a role to play as active members of this community. In big and small ways, they all count. Every voice and every act counts. This can be the difference between rejection and inclusion, between despair and hope, between being left behind and building a future. Let's change the narrative and see refugees as assets to our country. Let's shift their stories and show the values that refugees, soon to be Canadians, bring to Canada's economy. Over time, the impact and contribution in Canada, the contribution in turn to host countries in Canada is enormous, reflected everywhere in Canada and also on the global arena. Thank you so much for including me in this discussion. It's only the beginning. This is only the beginning of a conversation, as there's so many ideas that Minister Mendicino raised, that were raised by the panelists, that have been raised by Mustafa in discussions with me, by Daryl in other meetings that we've had. It's an ongoing process. We need to build, continue to build, and we need to face the reality that this is a situation that we all need to come together to work on, because the numbers reflect the fact that we need to find solutions, and creative ones. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Rana, thank you so much. Very powerful closing words. I'll echo one line of what you said, and that's let's change the narrative, and we need to do that together. One final word of thank you. I mean, this event could not have happened without hard work behind the scenes. I want to give a shout out to Alizé and Malaz, who have been doing a lot of prep work, and even during this session, moving people back and forth. It went out seamlessly from my perspective, so thank you both very much. And then thank all of the people who attended today's session. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your engagement. I wish you all a safe rest of the year and hope to see you soon in person one day.